This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
قال رئيس الوزراء الهندي إن على باكستان القيام بأكثر بكثير من أجل التصدي.
The Prime Minister of India said that Pakistan must do more to prevent extremist activities in its country. The Indian Prime Minister indicated that the Al-Dawa party is connected to Lashkar-e-Taiba, pointing out that it should be monitored in Pakistan and all of its offices in the country should be shut down. It was also said by governmental and security sources in Islamabad that the founder of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which India holds responsible for the attacks, has been put under house arrest. The Interior Minister of India warned that the area of South Asia is in the eye of the storm of terror.
There is increased tension between New Delhi and Islamabad. This tension was reflected in the new accusations made by the head of Indian security when he stated that South Asia lies in the eye of the storm of terror, pointing his finger at Pakistan.
I point the finger of suspicion at Pakistan, particularly after the interrogation of the sole survivor of the group responsible for the Mumbai attack. We have gained very strong evidence from this interrogation.
India has asked Pakistan to hand over 40 people that are assumed to have a hand in the Mumbai attack last month, in which 180 people were killed by armed men that India believes are from Pakistan.
India has not provided any evidence so far. The government is currently formulating the right response to the list of names that was presented by New Delhi.
لخفض حدة التوتر وصل نائب وزيرة الخارجية الأمريكية جون نيغربونتي في زيارة.
In an effort to decrease the tension, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State John Negroponte arrived in Islamabad for a short time before heading to India to discuss the current situation in the tribal areas and the war on terror. At the same time, the United Nations has added 4 members of the Pakistani Lashkar-e-Taiba party to a list of parties and members that are connected to Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. The only survivor of the 10 members responsible for the attack will be under administrative detention for at least 2 weeks. Mohammed Jamal Amir faces accusations of murder and declaring war against the state of India. He also faces criminal conspiracy charges. India is having a raging war of accusations with their nuclear-armed neighbor Pakistan, indicating that it harbors terrorists. However, India does not see that a military attack against Pakistan as an option. Khalid Al-Kashif, Al-Arabiya.
At least 5 Somali civilians were killed and dozens of others were wounded in fierce clashes that erupted this morning in Mogadishu. The confrontation ensued between the Somali government forces, backed by the Ethiopian forces on one side, and armed Islamist fighters on the other.
The fighting comes a day after Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, the head of the Djibouti-based Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia, returned to Mogadishu. This is the first time Sheikh Ahmed has been back to Somalia since the collapse of the Islamic Courts Union.
Meanwhile, Uganda strongly rejected an earlier statement issued by the Ethiopian Prime Minister, saying that Kampala intends to withdraw from the African Union peacekeeping forces deployed in Somalia.
As soon as Mogadishu witnesses a semblance of relative calm, it gets hit by another wave of violence and fighting. The return of Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, the head of the Djibouti-based Alliance for the Re-Liberation of Somalia, Somalia has not changed anything on the ground. Today, the death toll of Somalis increased after scores of people were killed in renewed fighting in Mogadishu. The confrontation erupted between the Somali government forces, backed by the Ethiopian forces on one side, and armed Islamist fighters on the other. Most of the fighting took place around government bases, which are close to the headquarters of the Somali government in Mogadishu. The renewed clashes seem to have further thickened the political cloud persisting over Mogadishu and the direction in which the country is headed. Meanwhile, Somalis are waiting to see whether the return of Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmad to Mogadishu will have an effect on the ground. The Ethiopian forces were scheduled to withdraw from Somalia soon. However, Addis Ababa recently announced that it intends to delay the withdrawal of its troops from Mogadishu. Today, Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Meles Zenawi, said that the Ugandan and Burundian forces, which are part of the African Union peacekeeping force, want to withdraw from Mogadishu as soon as the Ethiopian forces pull out of the country. However, Uganda expressed shock and strongly rejected the Ethiopian Prime Minister's comments. Kampala further expressed its willingness to increase the number of its troops in Mogadishu if deemed necessary. Many fear that the withdrawal of the Ethiopian forces from Somalia may leave a security vacuum in the country. This may work in favor of armed Islamic groups, especially the Muslim Youth Movement. The Muslim Youth Movement is now controlling most of south and central Somalia and standing just a few kilometers away from the capital. Meanwhile, the head of the African Union, John Ping, called on the UN Security Council to allow the deployment of international forces to Somalia to help restore stability there.
انضم إلينا من القاهرة الكاتب المتخصص بشؤون الصومالية محمد مطر. سيد محمد.
We are joined from Cairo by writer and expert in Somali affairs, Mohammed Matta. Mr. Mohammed, based on your analysis, where is this new wave of fierce confrontations in Mogadishu headed?
The current wave of confrontations is not a new development. Renewed fighting has been erupting over the past few months. This is a side effect of the ongoing failure of the Ethiopian intervention in Somalia. It also has to do with increased influence achieved by the Somali resistance, which launched its fierce initial attacks a few months ago.
نعم صحيح أن الاشتباكات ليست جديدة.
So you're not linking the confrontation with the return of Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, whose return is the only new variable on the Somali front?
The return of Sheikh Sharif has nothing to do with the renewed fighting. However, it can be linked to other developments. This new wave of confrontations is typical. In fact, the confrontations were much fiercer in the past few days. It's possible that other political developments may happen in the near or far future. This is possible regardless of the direction that these developments may take.
العاصمة الفرنسية باريس التي أطلق منها الإعلان العالمي لحقوق الإنسان شهدت.
In the French capital of Paris, where the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was formulated 60 years ago, a celebration was held with representatives from the UN, EU, and international non-governmental organizations. The French government honored a number of human rights activists, including 6 Arab women. Meanwhile, the French police restrained journalists who were protesting outside the embassies of countries that are known for their human rights violations. We leave you with Mohamed Wamousi from Paris.
60 years have passed since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was formulated at the Palace of Chaillot in the heart of Paris. Many articles in the declaration are only ink on paper, since they are not honored by many countries. The French government commemorated Human Rights Day by giving human rights awards to 7 women, 6 of whom were Arabs.
This sends a positive message. The fact that they gave us an award will help to encourage us to be more active in this field.
There's a lack of awareness in Arab countries pertaining to human rights, especially when it comes to women. Human rights and women's rights are linked to one another.
Civil rights and human rights organizations, such as Journalists Without Borders, commemorated the day in their own way. They organized demonstrations outside the embassies of countries accused of violating human rights and the freedom of expression. However, the French government tried to deny the protesters their right to stage demonstrations near the embassies, which led to this confrontation.
We are not satisfied with the UN's role. It has not been protecting human rights in the world. We are here today to bring attention to the countries that do not honor the freedom of expression and human rights.
However, France, which is bragging about its role as a country that has advocated for human rights, is also being accused of ignoring human rights violations in the suburbs of its major cities. In these suburbs, which have large immigrant populations, racial discrimination is a widespread phenomenon, not to mention the expelling of political asylum seekers and the deportation of undocumented immigrants. There is no place on earth where human rights have not been violated to some extent. The only difference between countries is the extent of their human rights violations. Some countries are simply known as human rights violators because of their long list of violations.
In our top story, surprising comments from Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who said today that following a peace settlement with the Palestinians, it will be possible to say to Israel's Palestinian citizens, meaning the Israeli Arabs, that your state solution lies elsewhere. Speaking to high school students in Tel Aviv, the Kadima party leader also spoke about captured soldier Gilad Shalit. She said that although we always want to return our soldiers home safely, it is not always possible. There is always a risk for soldiers who go into the army. Last night, during a Kadima campaign meeting, Livni related to the far-right nature of the Likud list, saying that now she remembers why she left the party. Today marks 900 days since the capture of IDF soldier Gilad Shalit, with no progress in negotiations for his release. Nevertheless, Israel today transferred 100 million shekels to the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. We get more in this report from IBA's Elisha Rabin.
Even Hamas didn't think it would go on this long. 900 days later, kidnapped soldier Gilad Shalit is still in captivity. No visits, no pictures, only a few letters as a sign of life. This week, Israeli protesters tried to block the entrance to Shikma prison in Ashkelon on Visitation Day. They demanded that Gilad Shalit be given the same visitation rights that Israel affords Palestinian prisoners. But police put a stop to the demonstration before it got out of hand. Hamas continues to deny the Red Cross the right to check on Shalit. Though the Red Cross has largely championed the issue independently, Hamas officials fear information about Shalit's whereabouts would be leaked to Israeli security officials. For its part, Hamas has refuted any claims that it may be mistreating Shalit. Hamas strongman Mahmoud al-Zahar says Islam treats hostages well. In fact, Hamas blames the failure of a deal on Israel. In an interview with Israel Radio, al-Zahar said Shalit could be released tomorrow if Israel were willing to cooperate with his group's demands. But what does Hamas want in exchange for Shalit's release? Freedom for more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, some with blood on their hands. A number of those prisoners will likely be released in the near future because their sentences were between 2 and 3 years. Some of the prisoners whose release date is near are set to take leadership positions within Hamas upon being set free. The freeze in talks between Israel and Hamas officials for Shalit's release comes even as Defense Minister Ehud Barak agreed to transfer roughly 100 million shekels to Palestinian banks. Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Salam Fayyad requested the transfer after fears became real that the Palestinian banking system would collapse. In Gaza, where part of the money will be transferred, many residents have begun using dollars due to a shortage of shekels. Shortages of shekels in the West Bank have been less pronounced, but concerns have risen that things could soon change. Shalit's family called it unthinkable that Barak would authorize the money transfer without having Gilad's release as a condition. Adding to their frustrations, Prime Minister Olmert's decision to free 230 Palestinian prisoners as a goodwill gesture before the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday. For IBA News, I'm Elisha Rabin.
Likud Chairman Benjamin Netanyahu has launched a campaign to ease concerns in the international community about the effects of a perceived far-right-leaning Likud may have on the peace process should he become prime minister. He spoke about this today with a delegation of the European Union visiting Israel.
The Likud government under my leadership would continue the peace talks, stressing security and economic development. The Kadima government has failed to produce either peace or security. They've brought terror and rocketing to our cities by bad diplomacy, which pushed peace further away.
Israel has been heavily criticized for building a wall through occupied Palestinian land. Now it's also coming under fire for a light railway linking Jerusalem to illegal Jewish settlements. And the criticism is spreading beyond Israel to giant French companies hired to build and run the railway. Critics say they're contravening EU policy. Well, here's the route. It links the illegal Jewish settlement of Piskat Ze'ev to downtown West Jerusalem. As Jackie Rowland explains, it's part of Israel's attempts to strengthen its grip on the city.
Traffic on the main road through East Jerusalem grinds to a halt because Israel is building a light rail system. The work has brought chaos to Palestinian neighborhoods, and the people who live here won't even benefit when it's finished.
The route of the train won't help us. The center of our commercial life is the old city of Jerusalem, Damascus Gate and Salahuddin Street. This train surely won't be going to all those places, so it won't be of any use to us.
The light rail will form a concrete link between the city center and a number of Jewish settlements built on occupied Palestinian land to the east. It's part of Israel's master plan to cement its grip on the whole of Jerusalem and ensure that the settlements become permanent. The contract to build the light rail is worth $500 million, and 2 French companies are involved. An engineering firm called Alstom is making the tracks and supplying the trains, and a transport management company called Veolia will operate the system once it's up and running.
So here we are at the end of the tracks and the illegal Jewish settlement of Piskat Ze'ev. Building this kind of infrastructure on occupied land goes against the Geneva Conventions. And now a small NGO is exposing the big companies that are making money out of the occupation.
Meet Joachim Wohlfeil. He used to work for big corporations himself, but now he's changed sides. His team has already forced a big Swedish company to pull out of a settlement. And now he's going after the firms involved in the light rail.
From a political perspective, it's totally unacceptable. We have European companies, on the one hand, helping to build infrastructure for settlements. On the other hand, we have our governments in Europe opposing the expansion of the settlements, and also by aid money paying for the consequences of the settlements.
Al Jazeera approached both French companies involved in the project. Veolia declined to comment, but Alstom agreed to speak to us.
We're very happy to talk to you about this project that we won after an open international tender to improve the existing transportation system in Jerusalem, the public transportation system. However, we are a private railway manufacturer, and therefore we have no political nor diplomatic position to take.
There are good business reasons for not investing in illegal settlements. Customers in Europe are increasingly demanding ethical behaviour from their business partners. So involvement in a questionable project overseas can mean lost contracts back at home. Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Jerusalem.
Banks in the Gaza Strip have closed for business after failing to pay the salaries of tens of thousands of employees due to cash shortages. This news comes after the Zionist occupation refused to allow the transfer of money to banks operating in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Palestinian government said that they will pay the salaries of those teachers who were suspended by the government of Salam Fayyad.
A new crisis is looming in the Gaza Strip, which is targeting all banks and financial institutions operating in the besieged enclave. The Zionist enemy has prevented Israeli banks from any financial dealings with banks in the Gaza Strip as part of their oppressive policy of blockade.
It's a new form of blockade targeting the financial institutions.
Israel is working towards creating a real financial crisis in the Gaza Strip. According to the Oslo Agreement, we in the Palestinian territories can't issue a Palestinian currency.
The financial crisis has reflected negatively on the residents of the Gaza Strip, especially those who receive their salaries from the government of Muqata in Ramallah. Banks were unable to provide the needed liquidity due to this latest Zionist move, which analysts believe is hurting the Israeli side as well.
The trading of shekels in the Gaza Strip helps serve Israel's financial interests and gains. However, Israel doesn't value this gain as much as it values its campaign of sanctions targeting the people of the Gaza Strip. Israel is tightening its siege on the Gaza Strip in order to bring the Palestinian people to a breaking point, thus pressuring the Palestinian people into bowing down to Israeli demands.
The Oslo Accord and the economic cooperation agreements that have followed link the Palestinian economy with the Zionists' currency. This has caused catastrophic consequences at all economic levels in the Palestinian territories. Meanwhile, human rights organizations in the Gaza Strip condemn this latest Zionist move, which is further exacerbating the economic situation in the besieged enclave.
لا تستطيع صرف رواتب لآلاف الموظفين الذين.
Up to this minute, the banks are not able to provide the liquidity necessary to pay out the salaries of tens of thousands of civil servants, whose children are still waiting to celebrate the Eid al-Adha holiday. Israel refused to allow the transfer of cash and money infusions, especially the shekel, into Gaza banks. This is part of an ongoing cycle of tightening the siege on the Gaza Strip.
It's a new financial crisis that has added to a long list of catastrophic crises facing the Palestinian people under siege. It's a crisis that helped expose the ugly face of the economic cooperation agreement signed with the occupation, thus leaving the fate and future of the Palestinian nation in the hands of its enemy. Bassam al-Bata, Al-Aqsa, Gaza.
The U.S. occupation is creating psychiatric medical clinics for its units in Iraq. An American report confirms that Gulf War syndrome is a real illness.
دفعت الأوضاع النفسية الكارثية للجنود العائدين من الحرب على العراق.
The catastrophic psychological conditions of soldiers returning from the war on Iraq have compelled the U.S. administration to look for ways to ease their suffering on the ground before signs of it appear.
تعزيز وحداتها بعيادات نفسية حيث تم إنشاء 4 عيادات في العراق.
Under this framework, the occupation's leadership decided to strengthen its troops with psychiatric clinics. 4 clinics have been set up in Iraq, where psychiatrists and experts in psychology work with social workers and nurses. Their mission is to treat the U.S. troops who have been affected by trauma after the battle in Iraq. When soldiers reach the combat stress clinic, they are greeted by a psychiatrist who makes a diagnosis and then offers the appropriate treatment. He might suggest that the soldier visit the clinic regularly or even remain there. Sometimes the psychiatric experts approach military units rather than waiting for the soldiers to come to them. A study by the RAND Corporation states that at least 300,000 American soldiers out of the 1.6 million have suffered from psychological disorders since 2001.
أن ما لا يقل عن 300,000 جندي أمريكي من أصل 1,600,000 يعانون من اضطرابات نفسية منذ العام 2001.
This report was preceded by another one that indicated that Gulf War syndrome is a real illness, and it is a physical condition different than the psychiatric one dubbed shell shock. According to the report, nearly 200,000 soldiers out of the 700,000 who participated in the Gulf War suffer from the symptoms of this illness, which include persistent headaches, widespread pain, cognitive difficulties, unexplained fatigue, skin rashes, chronic diarrhea, and digestive and respiratory problems.
وصعوبات في الإدراك وإرهاقا من دون سبب وطفحا جلديا وإسهالا مزمنا ومشاكل في الهضم والتنفس.
The study offered 2 possible causes for the illness. The first is known as pyrostigmine bromide, used in pills to protect against nerve agents. The second is pesticides that were used intensively throughout the war.
حشرية استخدمت بكثافة أثناء الحرب.
Blackwater guards are facing charges for killing Iraqi civilians in 2007. Their lawyer says they carried out their orders.
بعد سنوات من الصولات والجولات على أرض العراق من دون حسيب.
After years of patrols on Iraqi land without monitoring or accountability, a U.S. indictment has been issued against 5 Blackwater guards. They are being charged with the killing of 14 unarmed civilians and wounding 20 others in a 2007 shooting in Baghdad. One of the victims was killed while standing on the street with his hands up in the air. If they are convicted, the Blackwater guards could face up to 10 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter.
About the indictment of the Blackwater Company, we as Iraqis are calling for the maximum sentence because they committed crimes against the people of Iraq.
What makes me happy is that our case has moved up and we will monitor it. I hope that they are convicted.
The lawyer for the guards said that they were hired as part of a contract with the State Department in order to protect government officials. He said they carried out their duties as required and according to the demands of the State Department.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.